Hi, I'm Peter Smyth. Welcome to Leaders Questions. The interview series with a difference. We'll be speaking to media industry leaders and putting them completely out of their comfort zone. First up is Paul Farrell. We'll be talking about the pressures in the media industry, whilst also abseiling down a 34 high tower. Are you ready, Paul?
Not a chance.
I'm afraid of heights,
That's
just so
okay.
you know. Yeah, so brilliant. So listen, Paul, I have a few questions I'd like to ask you. First of all, in your role now at the moment, AI is a big hot topic. Has that started to affect the business or the people within it? Has there been questions asked? Has there been, innovations? Is there a focus for the brand to start looking at AI?
Yeah, I think for the last probably 6-9 months, AI has been probably the hottest topic. It's interesting when your 80-year-old mum is talking to you about AI and what does it mean.
Yeah.
So I think every business is trying to get their head around it. Some are a lot further on than others. My sense of AI is I think it's going to be as significant as the printing press was in terms of changing industry, improving productivity, and that's what we've all got our head around. I see it more positive than negative. On the positive side, I think even in industries like ours, creative, media, I think the opportunity to make mundane tasks more efficient, to allow people to kind of spend time adding value, creating things, and spending less time, reading documents, printing documents, editing documents, all that type of stuff, will improve productivity and make, people use their brains and the creative side of their brains much more. So I see it overwhelmingly positively. I think the only negative that, again, I'm not well qualified to think through is as these models evolve and data starts to pervade through AI models and people start to interpret data and build new kind of solutions and products and ideas, who owns that IP? Where will that IP be stored? How will government regulate that? So on one side, I think it'll make jobs more interesting, provide more opportunities. As things get bigger and more complicated and data gets manipulated, who owns the data, who owns the IP, who owns that? That's where I think the challenge is. But for me, I'd see it more a positive than a negative.
Is within the business, is there like a Layman Sphere that you think is prevalent everywhere, that they're just all our jobs are gone, there's going to be or has it started? Is there an education of it? Have you started as a brand to kind of educate on the back of that?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think a lot of businesses on the legal regulatory side are a bit nervous, in terms of, what you're doing with people's data. Is it secure? Is it controlled? GDPR, all those things. So there's a rational fear that businesses within their legal HR teams are trying to get their head around.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I think companies need to encourage people to start to play with the models, understand the models. How can I make things better and easier for customers and for staff? So I think there is a genuine fear and concern. It's normal. Bigger companies probably are tighter on a lot of the reg and what they do with data and how data is used and how it's controlled and who owns the data, which is logical.
Yeah.
So I think that's preventing a lot of people using it. But in other companies, we've seen examples. We talked to Microsoft recently. They showed some great examples of how companies are using it to streamline customer service, make jobs easier and more productive. So I think it's a national, it's the next wave. As I said, similar to the printing press, the Industrial Revolution, this is going to transform things, and people are naturally worried and concerned.
And in fairness, credit to our industry, it's press, it's radio, all the traditional sides. There's the same levels of staff that we've always had. It's just people have, educated and moved on and got into the more bigger, better jobs. So it is that history has taught us that no matter what it does, there's still an opportunity for people all the way through.
Yeah, I think human beings naturally evolve. Technology naturally makes things better and improves things. And as you said, within media, you and me were in the Irish Times almost 15 years ago. Yeah. Business is still growing and evolving and learning and bringing new kind of solutions and content to audiences, as are radio and TV. So I think it's how you apply the technology and make it kind of relevant is where businesses succeed. The thing we talk about is everybody has access to all the same technology. It's how you apply it and innovate and create with that technology. Everybody has access to the internet. Everyone has access to programmatic. Everyone has access to programming and coding. And now you have access to AI. The winners will be the people who could adapt that technology best to make their business better.
Yeah. Speaking about the industry that we're in, again, this every year there's scaremongering about digital. It's taking a bigger, larger piece of the pie. There's the two guys. There's Meta, Google, obviously Amazon is coming on track as well. Our challenges are always the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
How is your brand dealing with that pressure? Because if you look at TV, TV probably has the biggest challenge in that the streaming services are talking about advertising. Linear is talking about slowing down. The challenge is real, even though you had unbelievable growth for the last few years, and it's been not only in our market across the world since just before the pandemic. What way are you guys dealing with that? How are you addressing that?
Yeah, as you said, it's not dissimilar to the AI point. Every business has faced kind of increased competition, and a lot of it is driven by technology and innovation. So in audio, Spotify, Apple were there before that. In TV, you've got all the streamers, Netflix, Disney, all coming into the market. And for us, I think similar to newspapers and radio, what stands out is the ability to, understand your audience, provide relevant local content has become more important than ever.
Yeah.
Trusted content has become more important than
Very
ever.
true, very
So I think that's where I think local media has a head start now as things start to transform. We have access, as I said earlier, to a lot of better technology. We're about to upgrade our player to get us to a point where we'll have a comparable experience to Netflix. Now, that's taken us a bit longer than we would have liked, but we're going to get there. What Netflix don't have is the ability to deliver live, local, relevant content 20 plus hours a day.
Yeah.
Similar with radio, similar with newspapers.
Yeah,
So
very true, yeah.
if you look to the US, what's interesting in the US is the streamers are all starting to struggle. Not everyone can subscribe to 10 streaming platforms or audio platforms. There's only 3 or 4 that will sustain that.
Yeah.
And what they can never deliver is that local content, timely content. And that's where we've seen great success. Our player is up 20% year on year in terms of volume. That's a mixture of live sports and local content that's driving that. Same for radio, you see the same thing. Podcast, radio is kind of taken over the podcasting world because it's local, relevant, interesting content. It's not just the global phenomenon of big personalities that were there at the start. So I think that adaptability, that relevance and that local trusted dimension is what will help local media in Ireland and all over stand out.
I agree, and a very good point on the live stuff, but the local stuff, which is really important. That engagement between, that companionship between the people that you trust being the big key as well. There's a lot of stuff going on where you have people being cancelled for saying silly things, but there is a cancel culture that's prevalent. Have you built in a regularity kind of process for your content? Is your challenge, has it been bigger over the last couple of years, or is it intensifying for you now that it gets worse and worse?
Great question, and it's funny, obviously being on the commercial side of the business, you've always got to be careful that you protect and retain editorial control.
Yeah,
and I think what we've seen recently is, it's very hard for people to hold opinions. Immediately if someone presents an opinion that somebody doesn't agree with, everybody jumps on. There's a pile on.
Yeah,
and as you say, you can quickly become cancelled for something that could have been relatively kind of innocuous.
Yeah,
I think the challenge is as this evolves, media needs to be comfortable to facilitate debate. I think what you've found now is a lot of media organisations in Ireland, particularly, have been fearful of kind of presenting, opinions and voices from the other side because immediately people pile in from certain media or certain organisations, and that automatically kind of, has led to a lot of media organisations being very careful about who they bring on.
Yeah.
My view is, media's role is to present and facilitate debate and discussion, and then let the viewers and the listeners understand and make their own decisions. And I think the cancel culture phenomenon has kind of limited that perspective and constrained the amount of opinions and views that are being facilitated on Irish media. And I'd like to see that hopefully expand a bit more, especially as we come through a new election era between the Europeans and the locals, and our own elections coming. That breadth of debate and that kind of over kind of engagement with different voices is something media needs to stick to.
Interesting on your point. Do you think, and this is because it's been a debate for a number of years, people from that have been around media for a long time will talk about the people or the opinion makers in the past, or the people willing to stand up for themselves and for their own opinions in broadcast has kind of waned, or they are fearful of cancer. Do you think there's any superstars or anybody that you within your own organisation, or somebody that stands out that you go, look, it's like a Vincent Brown type of person, somebody that was really really strong, or somebody that's upcoming that you go, geez, they really can stand over what they're saying? Is there anybody like that, or are we weak?
I think it's become quite homogenised.
Right.
I think there's a lot of similar voices. People from similar backgrounds tend to find themselves onto the media. So I don't think there is that breadth. I think you see a little bit of it on, say, the entertainment side of things, where you start to see people with different diverse backgrounds. And I think it's important. Diversity isn't about, the colour of your skin or your gender. It's kind of where you come from. It's where you've been educated. It's where you've kind of grown up and the experiences you've had. And I think Irish media has become more and more homogenised, and there's less of those. Vincent Browns, Ivan Yates was probably one of the best as well, in terms of, stimulating that debate and letting different voices be heard, but equally challenging them when they were not kind of presenting the right view. So what you find is the traditional media like us spends a lot of time giving out about social media, but social media is the only place a lot of these voices have gone to.
Yeah.
And they don't get challenged on that platform. Whereas in a traditional form, as you say, Vincent, or back to the old days, I remember the days of the early debates around the abortion referendum stuff. You had some really strong opinions. I remember growing up, and the people you just didn't agree with, but they got a voice on RTE and they got to be heard. There's less and less of that happening, and that's where these kind of run off to social media, and they create this kind of vacuum that doesn't facilitate challenge.
Yeah,
can go unchallenged. So I think that's an opportunity for media. I think if they can find a way to bring, as you say, some of those personalities through that are comfortable facilitating discussion.
I suppose if you look at things, there's threats everywhere, but there's also opportunities. So collaboration. Our own business have had to. We got the fundamentals right for a long time. Consistency, obviously, for me and for a lot of people in businesses, is the key to being successful. But we had to evolve and collaborate within the brands that you've worked with, and you've obviously gone through a number of different brands throughout your career. Do you think paddling your own canoe is the way to go, or collaboration in terms of being able to evolve, to get that extra bit of revenue, or grow that little extra bit of reach, particularly within media?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a huge fan of collaboration. I think it's the only way for businesses to kind of make the best use of the resources they have, and then find opportunities that you just couldn't justify doing on your own. So I think there was a term coined, I think Colin Gordon coined it many years ago, called co-opetition, where you can work with your competitors and still create opportunities that are mutually beneficial. I remember when we first talked about partnering with RTE, people were going, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And the Rugby World Cup was probably one of the most successful partnerships ever in Irish broadcasting.
Yeah.
And the real winners were, the punters and the viewers who got to see more games than they would have seen and got to choose where they watched them. So I think that's one small example. But I think particularly you talk about tech, you talk about infrastructure, you talk about resources, you talk about kind of, how you develop and improve your staff and people within the business. The best way to do that is to collaborate and find people who have a similar kind of challenge or a similar opportunity or looking to get there. And I think the biggest challenge I've seen in every business I've worked in is this kind of silo thinking, where people spend all their time, internally focusing on what they're doing versus what somebody else is doing, and not spending enough time looking externally and looking for opportunities, and having that kind of, almost silo mindset that, well, we can't do anything over there because they're doing that and they'll step on our toes. So I think it's a maturity and it's a confidence that Irish businesses need to kind of continue to develop. And I think it does create those synergies that, everyone talks about, 1 and 1 equaling 3. There's a lot of opportunities there, but you just need to be open to them. You need to try them. You need to encourage and develop people within your organisation that have that space to innovate or try different things.
When I look at your stellar career, Paul, over the last number of years, right? But I'd always try to model myself on, because we worked together for a few years in the Irish Times, on taking risks. Obviously, is a big thing, but the best successes come out of failures. Mm-hmm. In your time, what have been the ones that probably everybody said, Paul, that's never going to work? Like, it's a good example with RTE and Virgin. But in your time, throughout all the different roles you've had, where everybody was against you, saying that is never going to work, and it ended up being one of your biggest successes. And what does success look like for you?
Wow. Genie Mac. I think you touched on in the first part of the question. I think it's just being prepared to take risks. I mean, I think there's so many examples of kind of great success coming from failure. And people have learned and been prepared to fail. And culturally, I think that's something we struggle with in Ireland. There's a cautiousness or a conservatism to say, I got to have the perfect business case before I go and do that. And I think you learn more from failure than you'll ever learn from kind of the spreadsheet kind of model of, will this make sense on paper? I think in 2002, we took a big punt in 2002 going after the business market. Air and Vodafone had it pretty much sold up. 2002 was seen as a consumer brand. We ended up getting to 33% share of the B2B market within about 3 years.
Yeah.
We went after text as a proposition. We bundled texts into an all-you-can-eat package. When I talk to my kids now, they kind of go, "You paid for text." So that's a different. But that, I mean, got us huge traction, and the brand took off. The Irish Times again. We set up a whole load of, back to collaboration, we set a whole lot of online partnerships with travel businesses, retail businesses, all on irishtimes.com.
Yeah.
That generated about 10 million of a return once it got up and running. Again, something people said, Irish Times won't be selling holidays or books or travel or furniture and that type of stuff. So I think there's loads of examples in every business. And as you said, RTE is a good one. And I think it's just having that willingness to take on a challenge, learn from the failure and move on. And I think if you can get that within people in your business, because I get all my energy from the people that I work with and seeing them kind of come up with ideas and challenge the business to do things differently. But that's all cultural, and that's where I think all businesses kind of ultimately succeed, is creating a culture that is aligned and focused and gives people the oxygen to kind of develop and grow and look out and build something successful within the business.
That's a fantastic answer, and it's actually something I was going to ask you as well. You've kind of half answered, which is what is your formula to produce that good environment, to get the culture right? Because you've obviously been in leadership roles in various different places, but it's every time, and I'll be biased because I worked with you before, but I know other people that worked in different businesses as well, and they all say the same thing, that the environment was set up for them to win. Anything that people miss out on consistently, or is there any formula that you could impart your wisdom?
I think a lot of it just comes from experience, and I think sometimes it's easy. It's a cliche, but that only comes with time and age. But as I've gone on in my career, I've had great bosses. I've had bad bosses, but I've had great bosses. The Irish Times had a super boss. Tony in Virgin has been a super boss, and what they both did for me, they trusted me to do my job.
Yeah.
And I've learned over time, what I really enjoy is building good teams, and you can only build good teams if you trust them and let them do what they're employed to do. The worst experience for anybody in any organisation, whether it's sporting or commercial or business, somebody constantly telling you what to do or how to do it. So I think trusting and empowering and letting people have a voice, and then getting out of the way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a lot of people are, you've seen loads of these quotes about employing people that are better or brighter than you.
It does work.
It does work.
It does work.
But you've got to give them, space to flourish and grow and get out of their way.
Yeah.
And then let go of the steering wheel every now and then and just see where you go. Take a chance. But for me, it just comes as you get older, and you've kind of been lucky enough to work with people who've done the same for you. Trust your people. If you employ someone to do a job, let them do their job. Give them the tools to do the job, and get out of the way if they're doing it better than you could.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, Paul, I'd shake your hand on it. I'll give you a lefty loosey there, because I think so. That's a wrap. Thanks very much for your time. Okay,
Let's get out of here.
let's get out of here, please.